Larry. Thank you so much for joining us today. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where do you live now? We want to learn all about you.
Thank you. No, it's excited to be here. Super, super excited. And thank you for making an avenue like this for us to kind of share ideas, experiences, and all that good stuff in the industry. We don't have enough. We don't have enough. So thank you.
For sure.
No, I'm Larry DeHoyos. I've been in the industry since 1998, so quite a bit.
Oh my God.
And most of the folks that know me know I've moved around a bit and lived in different parts of the country, but really got my start out in California. The California health system. Worked there for many many years, starting in managed care. Worked in the hospital system, worked in outpatient care, and then single provider practices. Then I moved back to Dallas. That was my first stop outside of California, which I am originally from Texas, so kind of going back home, and did Dallas for a bit, got a little bored, and I moved out to Boston. I'm sorry, I went to Houston and then Boston. Lived out in Boston, East Coast. I promised myself I would live on the East Coast for a bit, to kind of experience that. I've only always traveled, right, but not lived, and it was great. Did there for 2 years, and now I'm back home here in Austin, Central Texas. Very
Very
interesting, very
nice.
nice.
What was your first type of role? Like what type of role did you have when you first got started?
So it's funny, when I talk about it to different people, and because we all have an experience or a story of how we got just kind of pushed onto us, right?
So true.
But it almost kind of happened where I had just finished school. I was still going to the University of Southern California, and I decided to take a break a little bit, and I went to go and look for a temp job. So moving down to San Diego, went to go, signed up with an agency. I don't even think the agency exists anymore. I won't say any names, but they
You don't want to
uh,
call anybody out. Come
right?
on.
I know. It's their fault. No. So it was basically kind of like, okay, well, we have a position for you, but you need to go and take a test. So I'm like, okay, sure. So I went out to go and take a test. It was for originally a cable company in San Diego. I didn't make the cut. There were 100 of us. Back then temp work was temp work. It was one of those where
So
they were
true.
put in the back of the basement and stuff like that. But so I took the test, didn't work out because I didn't make the cut. They only needed like 30 out of the 100. I'm like, all right, that's fine. So then they had another role for me, telling me to report the next day. And it was with my first company back in late 98. And it was for a managed care startup back then, 1998. They had only been in business for, God, I believe it was 5 years, 4 years at the time.
Wow.
And they were just going national. It was for a health plan in California for alternative medicine, complementary alternative medicine, CAM. And ever since then, I started them. I started working as a verification analyst, basically calling up. Back then, we had to call up state boards, and we had to snail mail letters and request books of all of their licensees, and we had to do all of that before, which is the reason why it took a year to credential somebody, or 6 months. Um,
Just the thought of mailing,
right,
faxing any
right.
documents now just makes me want
God,
to twitch.
and just to remember that, even our tracking system was sticky notes in Excel.
Oh my
You
God.
know, I talk about that too, and that could be another podcast, just how far we've come on technology. But that's
So
where I got my
true.
start. I was with them for about 7 months before they hired me on full time as a primary verification analyst, and was doing PSV my whole start.
Wow.
And I was with
How
that
long were you
company
with
for
them, you
almost,
said?
I'm sorry,
How long? Go ahead. Sorry.
I was
How
with
long were
them
you with them?
about 12 years,
Wow.
which was great. I've been lucky, I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to kind of really go around the company.
Hmm.
I started out in that role. I moved up to a supervisory role. Then I went over to quality management. started working on that side, committee side, understanding that. I went to provider review committee, even the oversight committees where we would actually start to learn about the other side of the house, which is the terminations and the contract dealings and the reporting. So I really got my feet wet in a lot of that, helping policy, helping utilization review policy, writing policy. I had a
Wow, that's
lot
a
of
big
good
part of it.
experience. One thing I do take away from that is I was working on a project back in the old days where the administration was trying to create healthcare for all. Obviously, it's morphed into different terminology now, but they put a work group together, and our CMO at the time was asked to be a part of that work group, and we all kind of got a project team together, and we were able to kind of define what a healthcare provider was. I mean, I'm talking about 45, 50 different specialties, just all
Oh my
included.
God.
So we can kind of be sure that we're trying to capture everybody. And a lot of these now we know them today, like these are household terms, but before, we didn't hear about a lot of times, a lot of the mental health providers, a lot of the certified folks. They were just, they were
Sure.
certified. They weren't licensed.
Right.
Naturopaths, a lot of that medicine, although it was there, it was just not as popular as it is now. So I've been lucky. Moved around there, and I did a lot of health system. That's where I kind of got my feet wet with provider enrollment, which is a lot of my passion now. Really, really love that whole revenue cycle piece and
Yeah.
the intricacies of where we fit in,
Sure.
and understanding how much responsibility we have to the provider, to the safety of even a patient, all the way down to the patient, right?
Absolutely.
And allowing a provider to work, to be billed, to ensure that they're billing correctly. And that's kind of really what I like. I like that forensics piece where you can kind of go in and just kind of really analyze where the flow is going and where it stopped, where it broke. And a
Yep.
lot of times it happens. It can happen with us if we don't enroll a provider completely or correctly. Sometimes it's another piece of the cycle where it might be registration. And I've been lucky to be a part of a lot of that and to kind of really work through. And this is kind of where I'm at now, getting a lot of my expertise, being able to kind of just grow the career. I mean, I guess I've been in almost getting up to 30 years now, but it's still right under that. But so it's been a while, and I've seen the healthcare industry grow, morph into different things from the
Yeah.
big Goliaths. And now there's like hundreds of plans where there was back then
Yep.
was only a few. So yeah, totally, totally fun. Keeps it
I feel
interesting.
like so many people, that's part of our issues though, is we're seeing so many enrollments that are happening that are not happening properly.
Yeah.
And then we're coming out and cleaning it up, and patients, it
Trickles down.
trickles down to the providers are getting hurt with not being paid properly, the patients are getting the bills
Hmm.
and not because they're not being enrolled properly, so the providers don't get paid, the patients get the back billing. Where do you feel like the enrollment specialist could learn from, or where could they be educated properly so these things don't happen?
Right. I mean, I really take heart to a lot of that because you do understand the impact you have on the full, what I always call the cycle, right? The revenue
Yeah.
cycle. And it really starts with us, even though if you ask any industry professional, they'll say it starts with the patient registration, or, it starts with the
Sure.
submission of a claim. The caveat there is that the claim wouldn't exist if provider enrollment didn't happen. So,
Sure.
it's really getting a lot, I think. We talk about internal, external factors in a process. Internal factors being stuff that we can control in our own process. We can control internally, whether it be
Sure.
requesting information from a provider, making sure it's complete, and making sure we know the whole story of what the end result will be. Are they going to be billing for anesthesia? Are they going to be billing for primary care or specialty care? Once we know that, we're able to set them up successfully, and hopefully at the onset really get the whole package together to have them in that taxonomy, in that role, making sure they do get updated correctly. And a lot of
Right.
it is once things are submitted and just making sure that they keep going. You know,
Yeah.
they don't stop at a breaking point because they requested something or we're not following up consistently.
Right.
I mean, we all know it, and I've explained it a couple of times where we're not the only ones submitting applications to a Goliath company. There's hundreds that they get in a day. Obviously, that's what we think, right? We think they're only working on ours, and why can't they pick it up? But that's not that's not reality.
I say all the time, can't you take mine and move it to the top of the
Oh God,
packet, you know?
favors galore, favors galore.
Yes, yes, exactly. Absolutely.
And then we
Um,
go back and we talk about it. I mean, we ask statuses, and sometimes they just haven't touched it yet.
sure.
But you always want to make sure because you don't want to ever be at that time where 30 days have passed because they even give us in the email, please allow 30 days. Unfortunately, sometimes 30 days will pass and nothing happens. And what happens is at that point, maybe the app didn't make it. We never know. Technology is technology. Any moment in time, there could be something, a glitch somewhere. You just always want to kind of
Sure.
make sure and document that it happened. But,
Where did
and I think
you
that's helps the
was a lot
process.
of what you learned from just in the beginning and positions that you held, or do you take education classes to keep up on it? Like, what would you recommend to beginners that are
For
just starting
beginners,
out? Yeah,
and I think that's kind of how we all got started. We didn't know where to look. So I was
absolutely.
part of that. Now there's a lot of resources out there, and I do always 100% recommend learning outside of your own realm. Um, Asking questions, networking, I believe, is probably the most enriching experience for anyone
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
someone else in your industry has probably had that situation happen to them, and they can share some ideas. Might not always be the right idea, but they can share ideas. There's a lot of webinars out there. There's a lot of I'm a big thing about listservs, learning from the actual proverbial horse's mouth. When we talk about take it from the horse's mouth, getting on those
Sure.
listservs from CMS, from Medicare, from Medicaid, from
Oh,
even
that's
all
a
the
good
way
one.
down to a LexisNexis listserv, because you can kind of set those up to understand what's coming down the pike. I
Mm,
don't like surprises. I'm one of those that if somebody wanted to surprise me, then that's not my favorable moment, right? But so I always try to be a little bit more proactive than sometimes we can be, because our
sure.
industry we end up trying to catch up on a lot of stuff because
Yeah,
providers, companies, our own employers don't always give us enough ample time to do things that we need to do, and understanding that it does take a lot of time. Um,
they want
they,
everything done yesterday.
Yesterday, providers
They
starting on
do.
Monday, here we are on Thursday, things like that.
Absolutely.
So really
Speaking
keeping
of this,
on tabs on your education. There's a lot of resources out there. I mean, I used our national association in my younger days, just because back then that was the only thing we had.
sure.
And understanding the whole realm of credentialing, understanding payer credentialing versus internal credentialing. It's relatively can be the same process. It's just that we in enrollment, we're setting it up for the health plan, right? We send over the application, making sure it's correct. Those are things that a credentialing specialist would be responsible for. So us in
Absolutely.
enrollment, we're setting it up for the credentialing specialist at the health plan. A lot of that is really understanding and just putting yourself out there. Credentialing collaboration group is a prime example of just
Thank you.
enriching experiences, enriching conversation that brings everything to kind of light, and we're like, oh, okay, what are we about? Maybe probably less than 10,000 in the country, but I mean the group has probably most of them already. But
That was one
It's
of the
grown.
reasons why I started it, because I felt like there was no place for all of us to turn and talk about issues and problems and
Yes.
things that we were facing, and I feel like that's where we're at. But that's one of the biggest questions that we have for beginners is where can we learn, where can we get educated, and where
Hmm.
can we pick up on things like Pecos 2.0 that's coming out.
Oh, yes.
Do you think that's going to
I
come out?
we've been hoping for the release since 2023, I believe, when they kind of teased us with it. And then we thought, oh, maybe spring. Well, no, not spring. Maybe fall. I mean, maybe summer. No, maybe fall.
Nope,
Here we
not
are in the
now.
fall. Not here yet. I So there's an experience I have when we were doing a Medi-Cal, California Medicaid, when
Oof.
they were rolling out PAVE. They have a similar system, but it's called PAVE. I can't think of
Hmm.
what the acronym means, but it was the same. They said we're going to release it summertime. The thing was is that it's just so impactful. I think with any release of that magnitude, really needs to be tight.
Sure.
Pecos just has so many intricacies. It triggers so many things. I think in the own Medicare system, claim system, billing system, that they're just trying to be careful. I mean, I'm trying to give
That's
him the
fair.
benefits of the doubt, but because
Yeah.
we're anxious for it, we're anxious for that simplicity, we're anxious for the efficiency. We're hoping that things are just like, let's go. It moves, all the way like a smooth, like a, what do you call that? A smooth moving train.
What do you see that's going to change with it, though? Do you think they're going to make it cleaner and easier? And
So yes, the plan is, as I understand it, I don't work at Noridian or work at any of the Macs, but
fair.
um, the plan is that consolidating an application. I mean, I think that's where we struggled a lot, especially nowadays where we have telehealth, where we have providers working in multiple states. We always have to do multiple apps. A
Sure.
lot of that is just it's a process taker, right? So now they're supposed to be able to consolidate into one app. It'll be able to identify the states that it's going to, and it'll disseminate it out to those specific max. I mean, I don't know how many
Interesting.
times where working in California, we have a north and a south. If you send it to the wrong PO box, back then when we were doing mail, send it to the wrong PO box, it'd go into oblivion and no one would tell you. Now, if you had a generous processor, they'd send it back to you. But I mean, come on, if they're doing hundreds a day, just can't. That's not sustainable. But many a
Then
times I've wasted FedEx money and UPS money getting it there because we had to do a timeline, and then instead of a 9, it's actually the 7 PO box. I'm like, oh man,
sure.
but
Then you would have to resend it.
resend it.
I have seen people recently still talking about sending paper.
I struggle
I'm
with that too,
shocked.
right? But I really think over these last few years, we've really been put to the test that, hey, electronic is good. Previously people were maybe reluctant to go electronic because they would no longer have that tangible piece of paper. They would
That
no
makes
longer have a file to look at, something to reference. I've always been, and I still try to be a disruptor, innovator, trying to be a little bit out of the square box, right?
sure.
Because we have to keep up with the times. And,
Yeah.
we have so many platforms out there. Many things are living on the cloud. Why wouldn't we go to paper for Pecos? I mean, why wouldn't we go electronic for Pecos?
Absolutely.
And Pecos has really been a good sport. It started out very, very clunky way back when. They really, really honed it in, and I think
Yeah.
I ask this every time I go and talk in a conference, and I say, "How many of you are still doing paper apps?" Now, luckily, and it's for my eyes, you see less and less people raising their
Oh
hands.
God. I was gonna say.
but there's still always that one because they just like to have that tangible paper.
The older ones I've found,
Right?
they're used to
Yes.
that.
But no, I mean, I think 100% electronic is the way to go. And then, like I say, the last few years have really put us to the test to show that we don't need to have paper. We have good enough systems, even if it's just a scanning of the documents into a cloud file or into what we all use now, either Microsoft or Google. I won't take sides, but in the cloud drives, I mean, we can have
Yeah,
copies. And
absolutely.
because we always had to have, remember, for a lot of the regulatory standards, document retention. That kind of goes by the
Yeah,
wayside now because we don't actually have to have that paper. Um, I worked at actually my first company, and I'll tell you a story real quick on just paper. We had a file room. Um, we had our first NCQA audit. It was for a full health plan audit, and they used to count the number of doors before we would get to the file room because that would be their version of security. How many doors and if
really.
they lock. So we had the suite door, the one that went into the actual larger suite. Then they had the
Okay,
file room door, and then they had the locked cabinet, the drawer. I mean, I'm talking about the 4, 5, 6 drawer cabinets. So there would be 3 locks, and they needed a minimum of 2. Um, just how things
wow.
evolved, right? But and we had a file room down on the first floor. It was a 3-story building. We had a file room on the first floor, and the file room had so many files in it. I'm talking about 20,000 providers, paper files, including the including the QM stuff, the quality
Sure.
management. The floor actually started to slowly but surely started to cave in. Never to the point where it was unsafe, but they realized towards the end of their 10-year lease that they had on that building that there was like a little a divot or like a where you can see that it was caving in
Oh
because it was so
my
heavy.
God.
I mean, think about how much paper weighs, right? And a whole cabinet full.
How long did it take for them to take that from paper
So
to electronic?
they put a plan in place, and it took us almost a year to get everything. But I'm talking
Wow.
about they brought in drum scanners, which are the big high industrial scanners. They
Sure.
created a file system online in an online portal where you barcoded all the sections. And I mean, it was like this high tech thing for us back then, but it was needed. And now you can still reference all of that information without the actual
Sure.
physical document, which is the reason
Right.
why now I almost feel comfort in the idea of going paperless.
Absolutely. It's important.
Easier to report too. You can't report on paper files.
Yeah. So on the topic of Medicare, there was an argument recently in the group about the 855R and I, whether the R went away and we were just using the I. So I have to be honest, I heard recently that we were just using the I, that the R did go away. And I was like, well, I'm going to stay out of this one just because we're anesthesia, and anesthesia generally is handled a little bit different.
Right.
So what is your take on that?
So I tried to be devil's advocate. The R didn't go away. It's still there, but it's not an R anymore. I mean, that sounds
That's
kind of gray, but it was basically integrated into the I, one
okay.
application. And a lot of it, I think, was the mentality of the way Pecos 2.0 will be. We're not going to have, you're probably not going to see a reassignment section like that sticks out, or you're going to have options there, but you probably not it's not going to be as pulled out like the R is right now. We have a
Sure.
reassignment feature. All we see is those 2 sections in the application on Pecos. I think it's going to be more of a holistic application each time that we're trying to do it, just to make sure that everything still stays current.
Right.
Because Medicare does want to kind of really focus on provider data. They have done a lot of measures in place to make sure that, I mean, we've seen it. I mean, we do directories and enrollment all the time, and
Right.
everybody, health plans threaten us that they're going to deactivate if we don't submit a roster. So the 855R didn't go away, but they integrated into the I. I've always waited for them just to call it 855, but then those are already the other apps. So they're
Right.
still going
Very
to call
true.
it the I, but it's just one page. And it actually cuts down on signature pages too. If you have to do a paper app, there's a few things that when I do an online app in Pecos and the provider's not responding, we would be surrogate. We're doing the application for them. Provider's not responding to sign it. We send them a hard copy signature page. Whereas before for the R, if they were a brand new provider with us or in the state or for the
Right.
MAC, we'd have to send them an I and an R page. Now it's just one. So that even went down. That's already
That
process
helps.
improvement. But
Yeah, absolutely.
yes.
Can you explain the difference between assigning yourself as a surrogate and the difference in each of those?
Yes. So a surrogate, you're basically doing the application or you have access to the provider record on behalf of the provider. As an organization or as an individual, if you're a consultant, you work for a provider who does enrollment, and they have to have their providers enrolled. You know, it's against the rules for us to log in as a provider, or even though you technically say that's on their behalf, there's
Yeah,
legal release forms. Really, CMS really frowns on it. Anytime
sure.
you kind of talk to EUS or you talk to INPES or you talk to any of those people, they will not even talk to you if you're not listed on the app as a contact person, or if they have any inclination that you're talking on behalf of the provider and that's not you. So that's why they created the whole surrogacy process. Surrogacy process means we're a surrogate for them. We do the application, complete it as much as we can. It's sometimes it's even cleaner because we know all of the corporate info, we know all of that data, that detail, where the provider may not really have the tax ID, the actual address, etc. So setting it up that way allows us to do the application, and it allows the provider to be more interactive in the process.
Right.
They ultimately will get the application to e-sign, to electronically sign it, and the responsibility comes off of the surrogate and goes back to the provider because they're the actual ones that hit the signature button and submit it. A lot of that is because of that, the responsibility.
Do you have them set up, or yourself set up as like staff end user, or how are they set up?
So there's a couple of options. You have an access manager, which used to be called, I believe it was the delegated official or delegated.
Delegate official, that was it. Yes.
Now it's access manager. Then you have staff end user. There are still some restrictions on the staff end user where you can't. You're not. I don't believe it allows you to add new providers to your group, but you can see them all, and I believe you can actually work in the applications, but you can't add a provider, which is in a lot of times where we need to be at in terms of fulfilling or completing the full process. I always recommend, if allowed at your organization, be the access manager. Helps you manage the organization much better. You can term out, you can add new providers. Being that access manager, you go into the INA site, add them to your group, and then they'll get the email to accept the
Got
invitation
it.
for surrogacy. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they cut it down to only two options now, where it used to be the EMR section, it used to be INPES and then PECOS. Now they only offer the INPES and the PECOS sections. I believe all of these changes that are coming around, we see all these updates. I think they're all kind of getting set up for 2.0.
Yes, I'm
'Cause,
sure.
yeah, totally. But they're probably just trying to turn on little features once in every
To make it better
to
for
make, yes,
for 2.0. We're seeing a
totally.
lot of facilities though that are getting a lot of audits, Medicare audits. Medicare's coming in. They're really cracking down ever since COVID was lifted. A
Hmm.
lot of restrictions were lifted, but I would say within the past 6 months or so, I've really seen a lot of audits, especially with, No Surprise Act really started cracking things down. Have you seen or heard the same thing? And what all do you know about No Surprise Act?
So the no surprise, I mean, people really are trying to grasp themselves around it. You know, in a lot of
Yeah.
hospitals, I've been seeing it happen where they're trying to figure out that one point in the patient experience where they can tell the patient that, hey, this is going to be your responsibility. I mean, because I've seen it on day of surgery. They get their meeting with the financial person. Well, your out of pocket is $6,500. Can we take cash credit? You know, like I go into surgery in an hour. How's that going to happen?
Yeah.
So you know, several hospitals that I've worked with and know have really tried to find that sweet spot and where can you tell the patient in order to prepare because it has a downstream impact everywhere. Um, and I think CMS creating this, and even state laws are coming into it. You know, the same thing with the about billing. You can't after insurance pays. You know, the especially here in Texas, they don't. You can't bill the patient anymore for any what they call balance billing. You
Balance
know, they
billing.
have a
That's
lot
right.
of
Okay.
those too, and it's a lot of that is patient centered, patient protections, which helps because there are a lot of times third parties come out and say, "Hey, well, your insurance didn't cover this." Like, well, I didn't even know you guys worked with this hospital. And then we get the bill and then we get kind of stuck to that and be responsible to pay it. So the No Surprises Act kind of really helps that. Is it a good thing? Sure. Is it a bad thing? It can be, I think, in terms of process, in terms of mitigating costs, being transparent. You know how the hospitals had to become really transparent on their fees over the last couple of years,
Yep.
and they've it's been an uproad battle with them, and they fought it a lot. You know, no longer do you see a $600 Tylenol pill, right? It's a little bit more reasonable, maybe 400, but it's still a little bit more reasonable.
Price transparency has been a big
It's been a
thing.
huge
Some
thing.
people are actually building businesses from price transparency because you can see how much each facility makes off the insurance companies,
And
you
I think
know?
that's where the struggle was. You know, they didn't want to have to publicize what was coming out, and
Sure.
but you know, it has a good effect and a bad effect. You know, the bad effect is that okay, we either have to come in, you know, trying to bring those costs in, or two, stand to them and then look at the competition and see what's going on out there. You know, the hospital down the street from me. So
I was going to say, you think it's creating some business competition, but
yeah,
in healthcare, it's like, do
I
we
know,
want
right?
that? Do we want that competition? You know?
I know it's not like somebody can say, "Oh, let me go and see where I get the better deal for a surgery that I might
Right.
need."
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah,
like which doctor is going to charge me less today?
right.
You know? So for the doctor's office, it may not be the best thing.
Yes.
As far as the No Surprises Act, I had heard that as far as the directory updates goes, that was affecting that. Is that accurate?
It does have some effect. They want people to make sure that a provider is where they're at. A lot of it comes down to what I've seen is that people are getting removed from directories because CMS will do audits. You know, kind of
Sure.
how they do the site visits. They hire companies to do these audits. They do audits and they start calling practitioners that are in the Medicare directory. They're in any type of managed Medicare directories. And the health plans aren't just keeping the information updated. So
Right.
it really comes down to the idea of providers there, but now I can't access them. What's going on?
Right.
So then then they launch audits. That's why they're doing audits all the time. I mean, there had been a lot of threatening messages from health plans saying that if you don't send me a roster, we'll also do our own audits because we have to comply. So it's like the downstream effect.
Right.
But it will affect it, and like that's kind of why I said earlier how CMS is really cracking down on provider data, making sure it's accurate. You know, we see a lot of times now, especially with these freestanding emergency centers that kind of move around, even that are just happen to be businesses. You see providers, mobile providers, virtual providers that are all over the place as well. access becomes affected. I mean, when we think about it in our own perspectives, we're like, okay, well, I do want to know where I can see a provider. There's some of us don't. I mean, I personally don't prefer virtual care. I prefer to go and see a physician or
Sure.
see a
Yeah,
provider in
absolutely.
person. But some people do. I mean, to each his own. However, we want to make sure that that data is correct, and it relies on the provider enrollment team to do that.
To make
We
sure that that is accurate. And you can't hold the providers accountable
mm,
if the information is not accurate in the directory. If you say, is this provider still here? I want to make sure that I'm seeing the right provider for this. If it's loaded in Humana and the provider's not there anymore,
yep,
the patient expects that to be information accurate.
yep.
So I can see it. I can see how that would affect that, especially with. But that requires the insurance companies to actually update the information that we send to them.
And that's kind of where I was going to go to. I'm like, we talk about all these health plans, we submit changes, we submit terminations, we submit new providers if we're delegated, and a lot of times they just don't get updated. Um, I mean, years ago, I was submitting one provider who had unfortunately had passed, a deceased provider. They were still reporting him as an active provider, and that's kind of where it all stems from. They're like, okay, well, we have a specialist in internal medicine for allergy, and the provider no longer exists. So, what is a patient to do at that point? I'm like, well, the health plans need to be held accountable. We're held accountable.
Absolutely.
So I mean, I think it just needs to. We just all need to get together in a room and just play nicely in the sandbox and and get things. Do these things for people.
I want them all to sit in front of all of us, like from the credentialing
Oh
collaboration group, and
yes,
just have the whole room of people and have everybody from Humana, Aetna, United, and just let us.
that would be a dream experience. I think for most of us.
Everybody would absolutely love it. What do
Yeah.
you feel like is a major challenge that we all face? What do you think is the biggest challenge for us?
So there's twofold for me. Um, I'm super flexible, right? I'm not hard nosed. I like process, but I also like to understand that there's external factors that make a process different or make
Sure.
it difficult. So my challenges that I speak about usually are being able to understand the external group's process. We submit something to a payer. Why does it take as long as it does?
Mm,
Or why is it not being accurately reflected how I submitted it? Then also really understanding the back end. Why aren't they being paid correctly? Where did that process change? Where did that process break?
sure.
Um, but then on the other hand, we're challenged a lot with communicating to our leaders. And maybe in a lot of situations in our roles where we might not be at that level to communicate openly with the leader, but I think we're challenged with communicating to our leaders about the ramifications of the process when it's not done appropriately and correctly and compliant, etc. Following either be bylaws in your hospital facility or being rules and policies and procedures for accreditation.
Sure.
Um, because a lot of times it's operational teams that push, it's goals, it's expectations of the organization on a whole that metrics need to be met. But a lot of provider enrollment, even in credentialing, we're kind of just we're that cog in the wheel that gets everything moving, but we always don't have enough time to do so.
Yep.
You know, and that's where I struggle with. I struggle with that a lot. I struggle with being able to carry out a process to its fruition because there are so many urgencies. There's so many things come
Fires to
up.
put out.
Right, 100%,
Yeah.
100%. But yeah, I think
We
those are the main challenges. There's always going to be challenges on staffing, on budgeting, but those are things that I believe and I'm always not the most popular opinion here, but I believe that if we have good enough systems and we can really make our platforms that we use as efficient as possible and utilize, I mean, we're paying good money for those platforms.
Yes,
I mean, really build them
absolutely.
out as much as we can. Staffing should always be the one of the last resorts. Granted, you're expanding to 30,000 in the next month. That's different. But
Sure.
you want to make sure you mitigate everything you can internally before we go out and get more resources. Communication, a lot of those types of things are big challenges in our own industry. We work in siloed
Communication is
environments, and that's
huge.
what I like to break.
Yes, absolutely. So I tell teams all the time that they need to get out and go to the conferences, go
Hmm.
network,
Hmm.
get out, talk to people because you'll learn so much.
Oh yeah.
There's so many different industries within our industry, whether it be licensing, provider enrollment, credentialing. One thing I found really interesting when I started the group was how many people didn't understand the difference in the definitions alone, that they thought credentialing was credentialing as a whole. And still to this day, I have leaders who still call credentialing. Like credentialing is not, and you have payer enrollment, provider enrollment. They still define it very differently.
It's very different, and it almost always is a slide in any one of our presentations, just to kind of level set
Define it.
everybody where we're trying to go with this. Type this topic, for example. You're like, all right, let's level set. This is when I say credentialing, this is what it is. When I say privileging, this is what it is. You know,
Privileging, another one.
there was a lot of even posts, I think, last couple of days on even LinkedIn, where another colleague was basically explaining that enrollment, credentialing, licensing, it's not the same. A
It
lot of
is
times
not the
they're
same.
different. In our terms, they're different specialties, right? You have to be a specialist in enrollment to understand it. Have to be a
Sure.
specialist in credentialing to understand it. Same thing with licensing. I mean, it's its own animal. Um,
Primary source
Primary
verification, I feel like
source. I
should just
mean,
be that should just be its whole animal by itself.
oh
You
God,
know,
yes. Oh God, yes.
there's so much that they have to know and learn. And just in anesthesia alone, hospitals versus surgery centers, but you have to primary source, just those two alone, I've learned so much with primary source.
Uh,
It's absolutely crazy.
It is, but the fun is understand once you get that hang of it. I had a calculus teacher tell me that when you truly grasp something, it becomes fun,
It does.
and I think that's where I'm at this point, where maybe I'm not sleeping my full 8 hours a day, but I'm doing other stuff just because it's fun. Your mind keeps working. That's kind of how I operate. Where people will see emails from me at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. It's just because things are just popping out, right?
Things you're thinking of. I tell people all the time, especially new beginners in this industry. I've been doing this for 20 years, but I'm always learning.
Yes,
I'm always learning something new. I'm always picking up something, and things are constantly changing in this industry.
one
So
hundred
that's why I
percent.
love it.
Yes, and I'm not an expert. I mean, I don't think there may be, I don't know how many experts there really truly are. We learn from our experiences. We speak from
Sure.
them. They worked for us. We share that, right? And that's where a lot of times when I speak, I'm like, I'm not the expert here. We all share. I've
Learn
just
from each
had
other.
a couple more experiences, or I've had experiences in this particular topic. So that's what I'm sharing, it's being a facilitator and not so much the the one out there that's the know-it-all, because we're not. We learn every single day. I mean, there's not one
Absolutely.
day I can truly speak of that I have not either heard something different, learned something new, seen something new. I mean, healthcare. I have anecdotes for everything. So you know,
I love it.
one of my old, or actually where I started in the back then startups. They have a whole different meaning now, but he basically said about his company: today is not going to be the same as it was yesterday, and tomorrow
It's
is not
true.
going to be the same it was today. utilizing that mentality every single day totally helps the stress level.
That's
um,
so true.
I mean, because you always, and it just makes you a sponge, makes you flexible. Not
Sure.
so much, I understand we have to have process, but it's not where that we can't work with you.
Yep.
Um, you know, so that's,
Processes are constantly ingrained in our heads as well, and it is important. Process technology is huge in our industry now. I think technology is really going to be
it is.
important as we go. Uh,
AI is the new venture.
yes, it
Scary. All I say
it
is be
is scary.
cautious. Utilize it for its benefits, not for its detriments.
Yes,
Um,
I'm scared to see what AI is going to do for our industry.
yes. I already, even I've already seen things out there in terms of that, in the hospital setting, they're starting to have virtual rooms where a provider can be somewhere else and they actually see the patient. Utilizing AI too helps the dictation and then helps, I'm like, wow, it's literally, it's going to be scary. It's going to be something to get used to. I don't think we can.
AI is going to see the patient soon.
Right, I know, and it's going to start
So,
diagnosing. And I mean, gosh, we have robots that can do surgery, so why not?
that's very true. If you could give advice to anybody starting out, what would it be?
Be a sponge, absorb, and just learn as much as you can. It's something that has to be accepted, liked, that you like doing what you're doing in terms of enrollment. Because
Great
if you
advice.
don't, you'll find that it's boring. You'll find that it's
Yeah.
monotonous. You'll find that it's the
Yeah.
same for every process. But in hindsight, it's really not. There's a lot of stuff that changes daily. I mean, we like we just talked. We learn all the time,
Yes.
and really just go out there and network. That's how I think you'll get your best footing, because you'll hear it from someone else. You'll hear it from other parts of the country. You'll hear it from other hospital systems in your area, or every other groups. I mean, there's no more just hospital systems in our industry. We have outpatient groups. We have surgery centers. We have, I mean, there's a plethora of settings nowadays. Telehealth is exploding. Hopefully, Medicare, you know, solidifies their rule and not have to go back to it. I think it's coming up. I don't want to date ourselves, but I think it's coming up this month or next month where the expirations come up about telehealth, having
Oh
to
no.
enroll. And then if it reverts back, I mean, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a hard
They're going to make
transition.
everybody from telehealth enroll?
Yep. Because telehealth originally was set for provide for patients who were in rural areas that didn't have access to hospital care, patient care. So that was the original rule. Well, when a couple of years ago, when we had the emergency declaration, they opened
Sure.
up, they relaxed all of that, and even down to what our responsibilities were as enrolling folks. We weren't enrolling people at their home addresses. We were enrolling them in the facilities they were working for. A
And
lot of
that
that's
was
going to
it.
change if it reverts back. One, they're not going to qualify anymore for being virtual. Two, we'll have to change their enrollment. And a lot of that information in PACOs, as much as we think that it's safe, I wouldn't say safe, as much as we think that it's private, it is public, right? You
Sure.
can go on
Yeah.
data.gov and see most of the enrollment data that's out there. So we always want to be careful with that too. So, but yes,
They're going to make them enroll in every state that they see patients in. Oof.
every state you're going to have to put your home address, or you're going to have to find a brick and mortar location. There was a moment in time where most people trying to grow organizations into other states, there's always been that understood rule, like at a commercial plan, where you had to have at least one provider in that state.
Sure.
um, that kind of got laxed over the last few years, where as long as you had an address, then what they were trying to do is set up registered agents, or set up those mail
Right.
locations, those virtual mail locations with that particular address. But as we learned, like I said, I learned it that when you go on USPS.gov, you see what kind of location it is, and they know that it's a virtual mailbox.
And they
So
won't. They're not going to
it's really
allow that.
hard. It's really hard to kind of get around all of that, but it keeps us
Oh,
on our toes.
yes. And you can't use the P.O. boxes.
Nope,
They can't do any of those lock boxes anymore.
nope.
Didn't they lift the revalidations? They weren't making them revalidate, and now they're requiring that, right?
So that's what I'm worried about. That's a big worry of mine on a daily basis. The organizations that I've worked with, where we haven't done revalidations for 4 years now, and they keep pushing the dates out. A lot of it, I'm sure, and I'm just speaking on if that was me type of thing. That they're just trying to give everybody a moment. Let's catch up everybody. Let's start putting them on a schedule, but it hasn't happened yet. I
Okay.
mean, I'm going in and checking old folks that I was working with and seeing if they're even coming up yet for revow. Not yet. So
And
it's
they
kind of
haven't
getting
yet.
scary where they're going to have 2 million, 3 million due at the same time. Who nobody wants that orange letter coming in the mail. That big old yellow. So
I keep getting worried because especially with all these audits coming out, I'm like, is that revalidation coming up next? I won't
it's
be surprised.
CMS is trying to really get their heads around a lot of the things that have been going on the last 4 years, and
Sure.
making sure, benefit of the doubt, they're probably trying to get a gauge on, all right, where are we at, current state, and then where can we go from here? Like I said, hopefully with the telehealth uh, restrictions that they laxed, hopefully they stay, they codify them, but it's up to the Congress to do that because Congress makes the CMS rule. So it's not just if they extend it, that's great, but it's got to happen sometime.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, Larry, I think that's everything that I had for you today. It was so good to be able to talk with you and speak with you, and I've learned so many new things from you today.
No, I like I said, I truly appreciate this opportunity, the experience. I am so glad for this endeavor.
Thank you.
I wish continued success with this because we
I'm
need it.
excited
We just need resources like this. We need
for sure.
to hear from other voices, other folks, and help advocate for things that we do every day. And I think your effort, your foundational efforts at the collaboration group, I mean, has really, really enriched, even inspired those 6,000 plus members that
Thank
are in
you.
there daily. So no, thank you too for what you've done.
That means a lot. I appreciate that.
Yes,
And I'm sure we'll talk again soon, but I appreciate you coming on. It's been great.
always, always. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, Larry, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye
All
bye.
right, bye bye.